was a woman of 2 children who were killed. And she was an extraordinary woman. Well, we remember many extraordinary Iraqis in Baghdad who were living there. But she was a woman who we just found through the ordinary casting. And you hear her voice a lot on the end of a phone. And her tears, I think, or her sobs on the end of the phone, we hope speak for the suffering of the people that our soldiers have invaded. So we were very conscious of that, but it was one of the trickiest balancing acts to do.
Can I just add one thing to that too? It was a very specific choice that the Iraqi character in the film was a musician, because we've heard all this rubbish again and again and again. Well, the campaign was called Campaign Enduring Freedom, that it was to give rights to the Iraqi population. And actually, what of course happened after the occupation was in fact tremendous factionalism, and what actually happened, many musicians were targeted because they were seen as not fundamentalist enough, and they were seen to be not holy enough according to many of these fanatics. And many musicians were murdered or driven out, and it really was kind of another ironic twist that someone who's a musician had to flee his own country.
I wanted to take you a little bit back to questions of leadership in 1983, because I was looking it up, and the reason the BBC actually cited for not showing them was lack of balance. And this is something certainly many Palestinian filmmakers, when applying for funding, they tell them your story lacks balance. You're not showing the other side. And one could say Root Irish lacks balance in that way. So I wanted to hear your take on this idea of balance in filmmaking.
I think that's it's a big issue. I mean, there's an issue in broadcasting in our country. It probably is the same here, but there's a compulsion. Compulsion is the wrong word. They have to be. It's written into their charter that they have to be balanced. But of course, balance means supporting the status quo. It means supporting the establishment. I mean, in our case, you can make a list. It means being pro-monarchy, pro-organised religion, pro-social democracy, pro the free markets. You know, you can make a list of their definitions of what has to be defended. And not to spend too long on questions of leadership, but they were made when Thatcher was just after she'd been elected in '79, in the early '80s, and they were about. She had a program to attack and diminish the power of the working class, the power of unions. She allowed mass unemployment to rise. She passed laws against union activity, and she encouraged set-piece strikes. She provoked set-piece strikes that she knew she could win because the union leadership was weak. And they had that three-pronged attack. So Channel 4 had just begun. It was Channel 4, not the BBC. And Channel 4 had just begun, and they were supposed to be the alternative channel. So a guy approached me, and we had a conversation. He said, we can do films about trade unions from the trade union's point of view. So we took him up on this, and we did 4 programs which allowed the rank and file to speak, to say what they were faced with, job cuts, factory closures, cutting wages, worse conditions, how they wanted to oppose it, and they were very militant because they hadn't been defeated then, and how the union organisation, this is what transpired, and this is why they were banned, how the union leadership actually diffused their militancy and refused to organise, would organise it in a token way, would do a deal behind their back so the jobs were sold out, or do a deal behind their back so the jobs went but they got a slightly better compensation. Things like that. So we just allowed these guys to speak, and women. Really eloquent people, never been in television before, never been in front of a camera before, most of them. And they were, you didn't have to patronise them. They were very articulate, they knew the score, and they made a very sharp analysis of why it was happening. So we just strung all this together with some documentary footage, and the Channel 4 said, no, you can't broadcast. And the Channel 4 was run by a guy who was in this was the Social Democrat Party. It was an offshoot from the Labour Party. It was a right-wing offshoot. It shot off to the right. As if the Labour Party wasn't right-wing enough, it shot off to the right. He opposed it. The chairman of the Independent Broadcasting Authority was also an SDP, Social Democrat, right-wing placeman. And certain union leaders complained and walked out of the interviews and said it wasn't, we were misrepresenting them, which of course we weren't. They were there on the film. And they were banned. What that showed, indicated to me, well, to all of us, was that the balance is basically saying what they want you to say. They have their idea of balance, and it depends where you put the point. You know, it's where you put the point of balance, and where they put the point is between the Tory party and the Social Democrat party. But if you have a voice which says actually these parties all have the same analysis, then that's unbalanced, because that's not the parliamentary argument they want to represent. And I said, these people you have never heard these voices before. So how was everything else balanced if these were never on the air? Oh no, they were not. And so we had this extraordinary charade. It went on for a year. It went on for a year. And they cut the programme from 4 to 3. They cut them from 3 to 2. They made an extra programme. And at the end of the year, they said, we're still not going to broadcast them. And I'm sure you have the same thing with the Zionists and with the Palestinians, because their point of balance is the Israeli ambassador, the BBC correspondent. You won't get the Palestinian is on maybe once out of 10 times for the Israeli. And when they are on, they don't pick one of the many people who would speak brilliant English, be very sharp and articulate. They will pick somebody on a crackly line, speaking a language we don't understand, and then there'll be a kind of translation which misses all the sharpness of what he's saying, or she is saying. I mean, it's absolute travesty. Sorry, speak too long.
No, not at all. But I think we do hear this again and again, and I mean, Ken's been listening to me repeating this all day, but I've been quoting a great friend of ours who unfortunately passed away at the beginning of this year, Howard Zinn. And I know many of you have read his wonderful book, The People's History of the United States. But he actually talks about that, and he talks about the mere fact of selection actually reveals who you are. And so this idea that you have some point where you're absolutely, totally objective is absolutely nonsense. And what he says is, to call someone now ideologically driven as an insult, but what it actually means is he's driven by his ideas, and he's a man who wrote history with a very particular point of view by saying, I will challenge the powerful, and I will address the experience of the slaves, of women before the vote, of not the barons who have made fortunes, but the people who have worked on the railroads for 14 hours, and he records their experience. And he says, you might as well know this is my point of view right from the very, very beginning. And then many would say, and especially many of the postmodernists now, would say, oh, we can't take a position. But they actually do take a position, and it's an absolute bogus, and I think it's a misinterpretation.
A lot of it is in the use of language. It's in the use of language. I mean, Israelis have soldiers, Palestinians have militants. It's not valid. One is valid, one is not valid. And one could go on. But the use of language is very, very precise, and it guides you to a point of view that you're not aware of being guided. But it indicates how you should see things.
The free market, of course, is the biggest one, really, isn't
it? Yes, yeah.
The unfree market.